This is good news, friends. Wow. These were some readings this week, weren't they? Um, we were talking in our Thursday text study. Some people had never heard the body sawn in two thing before. So some of these are pretty shocking and pretty out there. And what are we to make of all of this? What are we to make of all this? When we thought that we are part of this religion of peace and comfort and Jesus, this one who puts salve, balm on all of our wounds and heals us, this doesn't sound like that guy at all. Right? In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus has been going around and he's been teaching that, we're to do all of these good things. He's been healing people. He's been just a normal guy doing wonderful things. Everyone's loving him. And then he kind of nails them with this piece. It's a hard lesson that we need to pay attention to. I don't know about you guys, but I'm one of those folks who likes to skip right away to the gospel. I just want the good news. Let's just remember that grace. But this week, we're confronted with a text that makes us need to linger just a little bit. Because, Pastor Brahm last week talked about, oh, my little flock, do not fear, my little flock. Jesus said those words last week. And now he's saying, do you think that I've come here to bring peace? No. So let's think about this for just a second. In Isaiah, we're going to be having Advent before you know it, and we're going to hear those beautiful texts about how this coming Jesus was going to be a wonderful counselor and a prince of peace. Not today. Not today, friends. That's not what we get. We want peace. That's what we strive for. Especially in our churches, we want peace. We want stability. We want to have this place as somewhere different than the world, right? We want to come into this place and be comforted. We want to come into this place and have a semblance of order and control and peace. And kind of escape all that conflict out in the world. But today it follows us right in here. Jesus brings it right to us, right through his word here today. Because you see, Jesus is kind of subversive. Jesus is not the same Jesus that we hear about in being this Prince of Peace. Today, Jesus is telling us something else, that we're not going to just have comfort and peace. And I think that we expect that. In fact, we try to domesticate our God just a little bit, right? We think we have it all together how we want God to be. And just when we think we understand that, we get a word like this from Jesus in Luke's gospel. Because, see, it's countercultural. It's not what we think it ought to be. It's not just this, oh, we're going to treat one another nicely and we'll have peace kind of a situation. Jesus is always pushing back against our cultural norms. Jesus is always pushing us to live in a way that is worthy of his life. And you know what this baptism is that we're talking about here. Jesus says that he has got a baptism to which he is to be baptized. He's going to be put to death on a cross. That's what he asks of us, that we're willing to die for this Jesus, for this faith that he's preaching, not the faith that we think ought to be the norm, not what this culture says, but that we ought to be willing to take the cross as well. That's countercultural. Giving away a jacket if I have two of them, feeding the hungry, that's not exactly what our culture is all about. Our culture says to get as much as you can and protect it because people are trying to take it away from you. And that's not what Jesus is telling us. So this fire, Jesus is bringing fire to this earth, and he wishes it were already kindled. He's been teaching, and the even the disciples are wondering, now, Jesus, was that last parable for us, or was it like for everybody? Because we're not quite getting it. And that's when Jesus lays into this commentary that he has here. Yeah, this is a radical message, to love your neighbor as yourself, right? Love one another as I have loved you, is the way Jesus put it. That's hard to do. Sometimes we don't even like our neighbor, much less love them. And so it's a hard thing to do. But what Jesus is saying is, that's what I've come to teach you. I've come to light a little fire under you. I need you to wake up to the realities that the world is not operating the way that God created it to work, that we need to start following Jesus a little more closely. If you go to the adult forum today, Pastor Sarah's going to tell you about something some of you have probably read about in the paper, the ELCA's decision to become a sanctuary denomination. Now, sanctuary used to be a really positive word. It used to make people feel good because they thought they were walking into the sanctuary for worship, right? But sanctuary now is a little more loaded. Just the word raises the hackles of some folks in our world, because sanctuary means something else now than it used to when we thought about church. So being a sanctuary denomination, what the ELCA decided was that we're going to be welcoming and supportive of all people, whether they're documented or not, whether they're here legally or not, that they are God's children and that they all deserve the love, the respect, the care that each one of us deserves as well. But it's a little divisive, right? It already hit Fox News. They forgot to have a ELCA person on the panel, so it didn't seem as informative as it did inflammatory. But love one another as I have loved you. It seems simple, but in today's world, even that is countercultural. And that's what Jesus says. I'm coming to bring division. Well, we got enough division in the world, Jesus. Thank you very much. But we got it, right? There's all kinds of division. We don't just have it nice and smooth. Many of you may have heard my story a little bit, that I grew up Catholic, and I had a brother and 4 sisters, and we went to church every Sunday until I had a brother that was old enough to drive, and then we got to go somewhere else for church every Sunday. We skipped church. Some people's kids. I was so far away from church that I couldn't even see it from where I was for many years. And I started to sense that calling from God to this presence in my life. And I started getting more involved in my faith. And I had an incredible woman who's now my wife, Mary Beth, who modeled this incredible love that Jesus is talking about. She knew my history. I have a checkered history, my friends, that you'll hear about as we go along the next several years. But this checkered history kind of dogged me in so many ways, but not with her. She forgave me. She lived with me as an equal in faith, even though I was down here and she was way farther on her spiritual path. But what happened is I introduced her to my family, and they thought she was the church lady. Remember that from Saturday Night Live? Oh, you're dating the church lady now, huh? And they were just worried that I was going to go off the deep end, become one of those religious people. And what do? I go off the deep end, and I end up in seminary. And so I was at my grandma's 95th birthday party down in Florida, and I break the news to my family that I'm going to seminary. And my sister laughed out loud. They thought that was the most preposterous thing, that I the one who they knew who had done all these things, the guy who had this great income was going to just give that all away? Boy, are you stupid, is what they thought. That wasn't exactly what they would have done. There's still division within our family about that decision. It happens. But as you think about this word today, that Jesus has come to bring fire to the earth and that he's going to cause all this division among families because of their faith, what's the good news there? Well, the good news is that it's both and. That we can still create peace in our communities, peace in our world, and yet follow this Jesus in a way that transforms our world, that really lives out the good news of Jesus Christ. You see, this fire potentially is a refiner's fire, right? Is going to drive out all the impurities in us, in our practices, in our world, and that it's going to become that place that we want to have, that place that God intended in the first place. When there's division, when there's disruption in our churches, in our families, in our lives, we don't need to be surprised about that. That's the way it's going to be. But what we can do is continue to trust that Jesus and the work that he has done in this world is going to be continued on, because it's up to us to live out that gospel of Jesus Christ each and every day here in our congregation, out in our community, in our world, to bring about that peace that has been promised for us. Amen.